border region, published in 2019. He's currently the country director of ActionAid, among other things. Please welcome with me this evening, Mr. Hussaini Abdu. Hussaini Abdu, you are most welcome, and it's great to see you. And thank you for agreeing to be on the program today. I'm really, really happy that you could make it. And I want to decree that, of course, the Lord Almighty Himself will bless you and will look after you. My name
Amen.
is Itwa Igodalo. With me on the program is Sonny Enebi, one of our co-hosts, and also Jumoke Akin-Taylor. Democracy in Nigeria. My first question is, do we even really have what you really will call democracy in Nigeria? The local government elections that was just completed, most of the argument, most of the discussion was that they were not elections. It was a bloodbath, rigging here and there, manipulation of election results, and so on and so forth. We've been through since 1999 to 2025, almost 26 years of, if you like, unbroken democracy in Nigeria. But what would you call our democratic experience in Nigeria, and what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you for the opportunity to interact with you and colleagues here, and thanks for inviting me. And I'm happy to be here. And the question you asked is actually a very pertinent one, and it's part of the conversations we have here. What we have, is it a democracy or is just a civil rule? For many of us who are involved in the pro-democracy movement during the days of military authoritarian rule, our immediate impressions of our transition was that we have transited to a civil rule, and that with civilians in power, we can put mechanisms in place, develop the right institutions, and prepare the proper structure that will guarantee democracy. But 25 years down the line, have we been able to do that? I will practically say no, we haven't been able to do that. And then where do we say we have a democracy if we haven't been able to provide the clear institutional parameters and the value systems that sustains democracy? We often refer to it as democracy, sometimes as a matter of nomenclature, trying to show the difference between our experiences under military authoritarian rule, where leadership wasn't elected, democratic institutions were abnegated, or the constitution itself is held in shackles based on certain ousted clauses here and there. And so we say, okay, institutionally, there may be some differences. We have a system that we can call democracy. Is imperfect. It has a lot of challenges, and so many questions have been raised about it. But as a matter of descriptive nomenclature that we can easily use, we can probably say a democracy, but of course, not the kind that we aspired for. A work in progress is something that we can continue to push and challenge the system and see how we can be able to use that to have a better system. And the example you used about local government and what happened in many of the local government elections is quite unbelievable and quite intolerable for our democracy. And if we talk about democracy, the local government system has been one of the biggest victims of Nigerians' almost recent democracy experience, what we call the Fourth Republic, because never a time that particular level of government been so emasculated like this particular period. State governments have completely hired the local government institution in a jugular, and this is primarily because of the resources available to the local government. And the more you have election and better election at the local government level, they may enjoy a certain level of autonomy, and that is the autonomy that the states don't actually want to allow. Government across government, President Obasanjo did quite a struggle with state government in trying to protect the local government autonomy. Sometimes you may argue that it did some selectively. That was what caused the problem between Obasanjo's government and Lagos state government. When state government begins to create what they call development areas against the constitutionally defined local government at that time. And that was what also led Obasanjo to suspend local government subventions or allocations in Lagos State until Yar'Adua came to power. We also saw that with Buhari's government, where they also tried to they made some desperate attempt to guarantee the autonomy of the local government system. That also didn't work out. State governments went to court. And then also very recently under Tinubu's government, we also saw we had a Supreme Court judgment that guarantees the autonomy of local government system. And then the federal government has also instituted mechanisms to ensure that local government allocations get straight to the local government authorities. But the system is still proving very impervious to change. It's quite challenging. State government decided to run local government elections very quickly or speedily, if as it were, because they wanted to guarantee to be sure that allocations will come, because the federal government says any state or any local government that didn't have any elections, then we are not going to send their resources to them or their allocations. And so the state government rushed it. But in the course of rushing it, they also made sure that they determine which party or which candidate wins the election. The state independent electoral commissions are the worst, or some of the worst institutions you can actually think about. Many times, including us in Nigeria and those of you in diaspora, your concern has always been INEC, 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 INEC. And that is quite important because INEC is our electoral umpire. And what happened at the national level and state level is very important to us. But the state's electoral commissions, they are actually not electoral commissions at all. Practically nothing. I think probably one or two states may be exceptions. But beyond that, practically nothing. No autonomy. They don't enjoy anything. The governors decide what happened and who is elected. And that's the kind of local government that we have today. So local governments, unfortunately, and also ironically, become the victims of the democracy instead of being actually one of the biggest beneficiaries of our democracy. And if you ask anyone who had worked closely with local governments or who have studied local government system, the irony is that the local governments did better under military rule than they are doing currently under our so-called democratic dispensation. Over.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you very much for that background and all that. So what do you think is the challenge with democracy in Nigeria? Why isn't it working the way we thought? Why are people feeling disenchanted about voting? Why do people feel that their votes will not count? And most importantly, what can we do about it? What can we do about it?
The challenges were, thank you, and that's a very good question, and that's a question we all ask ourselves here, but I will try to answer that. The challenges of our democracy is is deep-rooted. And sometimes those of us involved in this conversation, we hit on some of the issues, but many times we flag issues that probably may not be the real one. And for me, is the origin of the democracy itself. The nature of our post-colonial state, the kind of society that we inherited. And I know many people will always ask, well, why do we always have to go to colonial rule? Why is it that we've been out of colonial rule for such a number of years? And then what's happening? But again, we have a history. We have a root that is structured in certain strong divisive tendencies that we have been trying over the years to see how we can work together. So the experiment and the nature of the state that we instituted has been quite challenging in terms of pulling teams together and working in unison to build this very important country for the Africa and for the rest of the world. Second is that the midwives of the democracy itself. We went through about 30 years of military authoritarian rule before our transition to this current dispensation. 30 years in the life of a nation, it may look very small, but for a country like Nigeria, it's huge. It's almost about half of the years we are at the point of transition. They're half of the years of the entire country. A lot of cultural systems have been built around the military authoritarian formation, and that defines the character and the attitude of our politics. The society had been badly militarized in terms of its physical outlook and also in terms of its values and culture and what we espouse. And you agree with me that the military authoritarian values are very antithetical to democratic values. So you take our state governors, for instance, they are probably more inspired than by the way military sole administrators govern the state than being inspired by our democratic system. So our state administrators want to behave like sole administrators. And therefore, at the state level, they capture every state institution. So they capture the judiciary at the state level. So the state high court, the state magistrate court, or customary court, or Sharia court are practically in the pockets of governments, of the governors of the state. They capture the state House of Assembly. Is the kind of system we run today. A state governor can present a budget to the House of Assembly and wait there until they approve it. Or he presents it to them, and then by evening, some of them have actually approved it. He initiates a bill, they approve it. No one questions the state, or no one questions the executive. So it's in the pocket. Key institutions like the Independent State Electoral Commission that I talked about have badly been pocketed. So, and that's the reflection. I'm speaking about state, I'm not talking much about the center, because a lot of us have been involved in conversations around the center. We really, really know how bad things are. But many times we pay less attention to what is happening at the state level. So you have the garrison commanders as call state governors across the country. That's the second dimension. The third dimension is that key institutions of the country have been captured by the political class. And so we haven't been able to have an election that is acceptable to every Nigerian. But I will not be one of those people who actually think that our elections have been totally, totally bad. I want to believe that we have made some progress in our electoral system. But I also want to argue that many times we make forward and make three steps backward. When we think that we have made significant progress in our electoral system, then something significant occurs that sets us back. What is important in elections is people's trust of the system, how we trust the system. So no matter what changes you make, as long as people don't believe or people don't trust the system, whatever the Electoral Commission conducts, it will become very difficult for people to accept. And today, the level of trust for our electoral institution is quite down and has really gone down after the last election, particularly with the technical glitches that happened because people were cautiously following INEC and believing in it. And then when this happened, that also brought a lot of people down. But those of us who have been involved in elections and electoral processes, we knew what happened and along that. But the truth about it is that it's a very significant issue. I think ultimately for every system, whether democratic or whatever system you talked about, literally must put food on the table. It must be able to provide for the people. And I think that is where our democracy also has significantly failed over the years. We come from the history of very devastating structural adjustment program initiated by military rule in 1986. And we know how that adjustment program weakened the state because it withdrew the state from certain social service provisioning, whether it is education, it is health, it is basic tissue around our rural development, and all those things have been taken away. The state has been badly incapacitated and the economic crisis deepened. So when we transited, a lot of people expected things to change. They expected improvement, particularly in their material condition. But when that improvement did not happen, people lose it. And if you look at it, right from 1999 during Obasanjo's government, all through up to today, still a big crisis, people struggling to survive and make a living. Even when and people will easily say, oh, the economy has been badly managed, mismanaged, and all. Yes, it's true. But also the truth is, even when the economy was growing, because within we have certain two levels of interludes where the economy grew. And you all know there's a strong connection between our economy and the petroleum sector. Once the price of oil is good and the production is okay in the country, the economy responds because we are getting more for in a very episodic manner, two times during Obasanjo and between Goodluck's time. But the truth about it, even when the economy was growing, Nigerians' poverty was increasing, Nigerians' unemployment was increasing, and the Nigeria's inequality was increasing. So economic growth itself couldn't guarantee poverty reduction, and it couldn't guarantee reduction in inequality, and did not create jobs for people because the platform, the spaces where this growth was taking place are not spaces that are labor intensive. They are spaces that are largely capital inclined and they are soft in character. So whether you talk about telecoms or the oil companies. So because democracy has not been able to put food, literally, food on the table, improve the lives of the people, it is being questioned. And that is what has created problems in some of our neighboring countries, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, where we have experienced massive democracy reversals and where military rule have taken control. Another dimension of our crisis is also the divisive tendencies within the Nigerian ruling class. Of course, we come different ethno-regional and religious background, but diversity should ordinarily be an asset to our society. But unfortunately, the way it is being manipulated has also been presented as a liability to some extent, because the ruling class have found a manipulative levers to pull this either for electoral victory or for control of the people. And when they do that, they undermine different democratic systems. And we have seen that with the escalation of violence across different parts of the country. The level of violence in Nigeria today is unprecedented. The challenge is that we are almost at the state of anarchy. From the northeast, or with the ravaging crisis of Boko Haram, to the northwest, where you are dealing with escalating violence, to north central, where you are having episodic farmer headers conflicts, and to the crisis in the southeast, and different expressions of these bordering on communal violence and criminality. And that is the failure of the state to deal with it over these years has created a culture of impunity. And so where impunity reigns, you actually not able to have to control anything. And I think corruption has also been a major challenge to our system. I know that corruption has a pervasive presence, but what the difference is how nation states deal with it. When you are caught, what happens? But the way we have also intersect corruptions with our ethno-regional divisions and identity politics is such that it almost like you steal on behalf of your people, unfortunately. So even where they are complaining and institutions decides to take certain actions, people are shamelessly able to mobilize around those ethno-religious identities to undermine certain actions around it. But personally, I think part of our biggest challenge is values, the basic values of democracy. And this is one of the terrible things that the military authoritarian rule has done to us. Democracy is not as important as those institutions are. and processes are and systems are to democracy, but it is not always about them. It is also about certain values. Democracy is a culture. But the challenge we have today is that the Nigerian democracy is being managed by people who are not Democrats, people who don't believe, because there are certain values. Look, values of participation, values of dialogue, values of accountability, values of respect for lives and property. So these are basic values that are expected in every democracy. So if you have a system where people who are in charge of their affairs don't espouse those values, and the society is also becoming militarized with certain traits of lack of civility, you can't even have a conversation with people. You are not able to create a democracy. So it's a multifaceted issues that have continued to shape our democracy and undermine it. Your question is, what can we do about it? There's quite a lot that we actually have to do about it. I think the most important player in every democracy is the civil society. And civil society here, I'm not only talking about organized civil societies like NGOs that we often refer to, but I'm talking about that civic space, the space between that family and the state. That space is the major driver of our democracy. How it reacts, its agency, how it drives itself matters a lot. But again, that space is also shrinking. It's shrinking because the state is also becoming increasingly intolerant of that space, and mechanisms and systems are being put in place to shrink the space. But I come from the background that such spaces are never offered on a platter. You have to demand for it. You have to push back. You will need to engage. Rights are never given because it is not in the interest of the ruling class to just give it to you. But we have to claim it. And that is why your role as communities, the diaspora and all that, we all have a very important role to play in claiming that space and making demands and taking the right action to push back. Part of those things is that, one, there are conversations around our constitution. Whether there are changes that need to be made. I come from the school of thought that, yes, I believe the constitution is not good enough. I strongly believe that there are segments in the constitution and sections that probably needs to change. We need to devolve more power. We need to deal with issues of women's representations in the country and all that. But I also believe that part of our challenge is not simply the constitution. It has a lot to do with our values and the character of our leadership. Constitution don't run themselves. People do. And if you don't have the right set of people to run the constitution, they continue to undermine it. I tell people that let's even get them to implement what we have now. As imperfect as it is, they are not even running it and running it well. So while we are working to amend the constitution and segments of the sections of the constitution, we also have to work to ensure that the system is producing the right caliber of people who can help us drive the constitution and who can drive the system with the right values. Secondly, I actually think citizens' participation is very key. Our participation has been reduced to elections, and that is always the most exciting period in the country, the campaigns, trains, and all those things, and the heated political conversations, the energy that comes with the electioneering process. But unfortunately, it ends there, and participation has been deeply constrained, and government has become aloof of the people, and it only comes in quest for validation. And sometimes that validation, sometimes they actually think is unnecessary. And so that's what we need to deepen that element of citizens' participation. And I talk particularly women's participation and the participation of young people. Women's participation in particular. Today in Nigeria, we actually have one of the least representation of women in politics, probably around 6%. This is one of the least you can think about in Africa. And that is not about the capacity of women, but it is more about how the patriarchal forces have intersect with the character of our politics to exclude women. I come from a segment of Nigeria where no woman in some houses of assembly have ever been elected. Northwest Nigeria has about 7 states. And out of that 7 states, probably maybe Kaduna, in a very sporadic manner, could have one woman in every parliamentary period or session. But in about 6 of those states, no woman had ever been elected in the 25 years of the return to Senate Assembly. Yes, you may find 1 or 2 elected at the National Assembly level, but at the State Assembly level, which is actually the closest to the people, you don't find. And you go to a National Assembly, how many women do you have there? You go to the Federal Executive Council, you also don't have. And when efforts have been made in the last 20 years to make the right amendment that could actually support the process of women's representation, and we have continuously failed. Because again, women issues, even within the parliament, can actually get badly trivialized and dismissive, even sometimes by even women who are also in such spaces. So that's what we need to deal with. Youth representation. About 60% of our population is around 0 to 24 years. That's massive. So it's a very youthful population. And like you all know, and I know many of our experts on this, is that such demographic structure can actually be an asset, and it can also be a liability depending on how you manage it. So we are not managing it well, and it's becoming a huge liability to the country with the scale of violence and criminality that we're experiencing in the country because we haven't been able to manage it well. Youth spaces have been badly limited, and system that's supposed to support them is really bad. And the challenge in the country is not simply about unemployment. And people have seen economists, we talk much about unemployment, but we don't also talk about underemployment. A significant proportion of people, young people, are not struggling with the challenges of unemployment. Actually, it's actually a case of underemployment because of the massive presence of the informal sector. And because the formal spaces have been very restricted, the economy has not been able to support that expansion. So people are operating in the informal space. And what we use to define our unemployment statistics by ILO is quite very limiting because it doesn't talk about the nature of the job. It talks more about the hour of work per week. And basically, when you do that, you will find people, yes, who are working. But again, the work is what they are doing is not commensurate to their capacity. And what they are earning is also not commensurate to what they ordinarily should be earning. And so we need to respond to that as well in terms of deepening participation. They are different, like what we produced recently in terms of looking at the challenges and stakeholders' demand. Nigeria has different democracy stakeholders, from civil society through the labor union, through women's group, through our different ethno-regional formations and order. And we all have different kinds of demands on our democracy and what we want to see done. And it's quite a learning journey to hear people talking about what should be done for democracy to get better. And there are plethora of them. But from where I see it, is that ultimately the democracy must be able to provide for the people. It must be able to put food on the table. So transforming the economy and making the economy more people-oriented than making it more growth-related. I know, basic conversations that we must have growth before this or before that. But the kind of policies that we take that seems to push people back around below the poverty line is just unacceptable. the kind of policy designs we put, that probably is relying on long-term percolation of some particular class accumulating, and then from their accumulation, it can now go down to the ordinary people. And then we are waiting, and in my own linguistic mythology, we say, Sadaka Yalla, you're waiting for someone to drop it on your table. It just cannot work for our democracy. And that is why people are protesting. That is why people are frustrated, and that is why people are disenchanted. The disenchantment is more economic than it is political. Over.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just ask one or two more questions, and then I'll hand over to Pastor Sonny. Pastor Sonny, so that he can take the questions and answer and things like that. You've said some very, very cogent things and some very, very important things. You spoke about militarization of our environment. You spoke about the capturing of key institutions. You spoke about people not trusting the system. And you spoke about women's representation or lack of it. The issue now is, this is what we've been faced with. We now have a political class that have instituted themselves, that are copying the military, that are taking winner take all, capturing everywhere. What are the people going to do, and what are the people supposed to do, and what can we do at this point in time? And how do we react as a people and as a nation to this situation where governors are so powerful, president is so powerful, so on and so forth? If you don't kowtow to what they want, you would miss your patronage, or you'll be ostracized, or you'll be accused of one thing or the other. So the people seem to themselves even have been captured. So what do they do? How do we sort out this situation? And what is your counsel of how to move forward as a nation? After this, Sonny and Jumoke will take over to ask a few questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but from where I see it, I think there are two ways to handle this. One is an immediate term reactions, and the other one is a long-term or medium-term kind of engagement. One is the principle that we should all accept that despite its imperfections and challenges, democracy is very important to all of us, because if we manage it well, it can become a leveler where anybody within the country can become anything under that space. But resorting to authoritarian rule on where we're coming from, if we understand the history very well and the challenges some of us experienced during those periods, you could just recognize that it's a no-no. And therefore, we have this, and we have to get it to work, and we must get it to work better. And what are the immediate things around that? One is that we need to deepen our political education and create the necessary awareness that will help citizens to make the right choices. I think this conversation is more about choices. Who are we choosing? Who is representing us? And because of people's deepening poverty and institutional capture that I mentioned about, it's been very difficult for people to make the right choices. But we recognize that when we invest in the people, when we have conversation that educates people, including platforms like this that you have created, helps a lot in creating awareness. And then even you, whether you are in diaspora or you are at home, how you interface with people at home, the messages you pass, the kind of education you give them also helps in taking decisions. I think one of our biggest challenge as a country, and I'm sorry to say this, is also our middle class. A lot of Nigerians will tell you the middle class has been emasculated. It does not exist. It doesn't that because of structural adjustment, poverty, and all that. Yes, I believe that the size of our middle class is relatively small compared to the size of the country and even the economy. We can be bigger than it, but I still believe that there's a middle class. But the middle class is quite a very aloof class. It's a class that does not pay important attention or significant attention to the country. What it does is that it just operates outside the space it disengages itself. You don't have water, you sink a borehole. You don't have security, you get bouncers and put a security guard in your house. You don't have electricity, get a generator, and now get solar. Education is sinking, you pull your children, you put them in private schools, or you send them abroad. The health services is zero, you just patronize private hospital, or you go out of the country and get your treatment. When the heat becomes too heated, you japa. And we have not been engaging the system, as it were, and everywhere in the world. And I want to believe those of you at diaspora, you may agree with me on this. The role that middle class actually play in the economy and politics. And their knowledge, their base is always very important in defining the direction that a country takes. We need to rejig our middle class and create the necessary awareness for the middle class to take Nigeria seriously and begin to also ask the right questions. Thirdly, I think that we need to also ask, we need to make some fundamental changes to our system. Approaches, it can be difficult. I have been involved in legislative advocacy on so many things. It can be very frustrating, and you may not get it through. But again, we can't get tired because the project of nation building is not a project of building a house. But even when you are building a house, you still have to do a lot of maintenance even when the structure is ready. Nation building is a long-term project, and we must accept that it can be frustrating as well, and it can be messy. So it's not a linear process where we expect that, oh, we keep building on this. It can be very messy. You may make significant progress and suddenly you drop. But we have to keep pushing on that. And I think there are also, and then the constitutional issue that we talk about, national conferences in Nigerians we've had so many conferences right from the colonial time and up to date. And yet when we go, it's the same issues that we're talking about. But I always tell people that dialoguing is still part of democracy. Having conversation, keep talking. Talking is part of it. It's far, far better than carrying arms. So any society that stops talking is a dying one. So, and we saw it. You know, when the day Sudan stops talking, Sudan is at arms with itself. And that's a very important example, a recent example I need to provide. Conversations have to continue. It can become monotonous. It can be frustrating. But again, that's what we need to do. There are long-term projects around it. I really think that our education, our curriculum, our system is actually not supporting our nation building. The way we run our education, and every society recognize that education is the ideological arm of a nation state. That is where you are brought up to be a citizen. That is where your indoctrination that's where it takes place. That is where you get the connection with your country or you get disconnected with your country. And that is the area that we are also not taking seriously. We have turned education to very simply a space where you go, get some good grades, get to higher school, and get a good job. Education is more than that. It's far more than that. And many of you who are in diaspora will probably attest to this, what the states in those locations are doing with education. And I think we need to shift our curriculum to be able to support our nation building effort. Not simply nation building in terms of industrialization and technology and what that's important. That's what we need to get in education. But the soft side, there's a soft side of it. And many of you may hear between software and the hardware. They are core and they work together. If you have all the brilliant hardware and fanciful looking and all that, and there's no software to run them, it's a problem. And the software in our context our values and culture. That is why we teach that. That's why we can build it. That's why we can begin to think about national integration. How we can have a Nigeria. Our diversity, look, it's a beautiful idea, in my opinion. If God had wanted every one of us to come and be the same shape, same color, same language, same everything, we would get it. But if you look at diversity, it's a state of nature. That's what nature is. We are created in pairs, in multiple space. That's what makes the world beautiful. And I personally think this is the beauty of Nigeria. So we can make our diversity to become our asset. And we can't do that by simple machinery of the state. We can do that by the nature of the education that we provide to our children, to the young ones who are coming, and how we connect them. So there's a lot that we can do as a country. But if you look at the situation, it can look very frustrating. And even me here, sometimes I look at the state of the country and I ask myself, where do we start from? You sometimes ask yourself that kind of question, the logjam that we found out. Where do you start from? But we know there's a lot we can do. All we need is the political will to do some of those things. Somebody who will say that enough of this state of this country, that we want to take a different path and galvanize people. I think the kind of leader we need as a country is not that simple technocratic leader. And this is where I disagree with many of my friends on it. I think what we need as a leader is a leader who will inspire us. A leader who will inspire us, who will galvanize us, who we can trust. The issue around infrastructure, security, these things will come the moment Nigerians are inspired, their imaginations are captured, and they have a leader that they are ready to follow. If we take Nigeria and if we choose such leaders, whether it's at state level or it's at national level, those things will begin to fall together. They begin to fall together. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should just get anyone. Yeah, I have to be properly. For you to actually be able to inspire Nigerians, you must come with a certain level of depth. Of course, you have to have certain depth, certain knowledge. You have to be knowledgeable on certain things. You have to know this country and know it well. You have to appreciate our challenges. You have to know how to respond to those challenges. But ultimately, what we need is that person who will inspire us all to believe, to start believing in the country again. So believing in the country will drive all of us. It will galvanize our energy, and probably we can be and we see everyone, including those of you in diaspora, will come and will be part of this struggle together. But I think it's both there are immediate things we need to do, there are medium-term things that we need to do, and there are also things that will take a long time for us to achieve. But what we just need to do is to keep our eye on this and recognizing that is this a direction that we are taking. We also recognize that we need to continue to build on our democracy and that we don't want to have a reversal. Over.
Thank you very much, Mala Abdullah. My name is Pastor Sunny. I I thank you very much for the way you have laid out all of these structures. So the question to really ask now, I mean, you've touched on so many things, and a lot of people have wondered in the past, um, Nigeria, are we really ripe for democracy? Shouldn't we be looking at some other alternative? Some have argued that democracy thrives only when the citizens are politically matured, educated, and have some measure of economic power, And so, do you think Nigerians have reached that level of political maturity? What gaps are we ripe for democracy at this time?
pertinent one. That's a good question, and I've been asked this kind of question several times. My sense is actually this. Yes, I agree with you. Liberal democracy, as we talk about it today, requires a certain level of economic development, growth, because again, you don't need to be hungry, that your economic condition can allow you to take some rational decisions, because again, democracy has a lot to do with certain rational choices. And then education, like you talk about, you have to be a certain level of awareness for us to do that. And in these two parameters, I can say that we are challenged. Our economy is not doing well. Our poverty is almost 60% poor. And so many things are wrong with the system, as it were. But again, it depends on what we mean by democracy. I have problems when we just pick an idea and structures and system and we superimpose it on our country, despite our challenges, and expect us to run that efficiently. But I see democracy differently. I see democracy as participation, that citizens can engage and they can participate in so many ways in decision-making process, in elections, and so many. Then two, that their rights are guaranteed, that they enjoy certain fundamental rights, and that they can be equal before the laws. So there are certain parameters, and I don't want to say that one part of the world is ripe to enjoy that and another part of the world should not enjoy those things. I think these are basic principles of democracy. We all should enjoy it. But the institutional framework that we use to deliver that can be different. And I give you, for instance, we run a very presidential system of government, which we borrowed from America. And I believe that even Americans are struggling with their own. And then we brought it and put it here. Look at the size of American economy and look at the size of our economy. We operate a bicameral legislation at the national level, the Senate and the House of Reps, just as you have in the United States. Does that make any economic sense in our context? Can't we have something different? We have a history of protracted military authoritarian rule, but we develop a presidential system, which is almost like a military rule, because the presidential system, and I used to teach political science in the university, and I know there are ways I describe it in those days in my class, and I say a presidential system is a dictatorship of the president. And then the parliamentary system is a dictatorship of the parliament. It's not exactly so, but this is how it looks like. It's a dictatorship of the president, because the president does not only have executive function, he also has a legislative function. And many times people don't accept it. His legislative function is that he passes executive orders. United States is currently being governed by executive orders. And you have that. They make law, they influence, they control resources. I think that we should have a system that is not presidential, a midway between, because we don't necessarily have to copy. And I think this is where what we call democracy has always been, that we see democracy as something that we have to take from somewhere. But if we see democracy as something inherent, as human beings that we deserve, that as human being, as a citizen in my country, I deserve to participate in the affairs that
context. What
yes.
would you suggest? How do you suggest we tinker with the current democracy
so
that
my
we are not just copying?
Yeah, we shouldn't copy. Yeah. We should have a system that takes care of this. We should. I don't actually think that we should be running an election every 4 years. I actually think it's very destructive, and it does not allow for continuity in terms of visioning and directions and order. You can't vision for a country, for a state for 4 years.
So how many years will you suggest?
Well, my suggestion will probably be that if we can have a single term, to some extent of 6 years or 8 years or whatever, but not this 4 years ritual, that we are always having. I knew that part of our reason why we're having this frequency of election every 4 years is also because of our diversity. And we want to make sure that power goes around and everywhere. And I respect that. We have to manage our diversity. But we
It's
can manage
obvious
our
that it's not
diversity
working.
in a way that whoever is in power serve the interests of the entire country, not the interest of its ethnicity or religion or whatever. We have to change our current structure of the presidential system. I think that we can have a unicameral legislation. We don't need a bicameral legislation. I actually think that the State House of Assemblies, we can retain the State House of Assemblies, but I also feel that we can get the National Assembly elected from the State House of Assembly. What actually means is that when you are elected in the State House of Assembly, then the Assembly, your members, your colleagues in the Assembly can elect you to come to the National Assembly. And therefore, what you are paid for is your work at the state level. Then when you come to National Assembly assignment, you are paid for your sittings, that make sure they take care of your accommodation, your travels, and all that. And therefore, you have real people who are representing their state or their constituencies in that. And then we don't need to spend so much money. Our election, I don't know how many of you know that our election is extremely expensive. We print ballot papers as if we are printing money. The cost of doing it, the secrecy of the process, and so many things involved in it. So I think we can save resources, we can manage it, we can take government closer to the people when we reduce some of those structure. We need to bring back our local government systems. We need to strengthen it. We need to build it and get it to be much closer to the people. We have to transform our military, and we need to have a proper civilian control of the military institution. I think we haven't done that in the last 25 years. We have an institution that had held this country by the jugular for over 30 years. We transited, but we haven't been able to subject the military institution to a proper civilian control. And I think that we need to do, and so our security governance must change.
So how do you mean? Let me just take you up on that quickly.
Yes.
The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He appoints all the military chiefs. I think, well, a lot of people believe that they are over-submissive right now. So what do you mean that we have to bring
Yes,
them?
they are probably over-submissive, but they are very submissive to the president because he's the commander-in-chief. But they are not submissive to other accountability institutions. Take, for instance, the Senate Committee on Defense, or the House of Reps Committee on Defense, or the different civil institutions that we have, whether it is civil society or whether it is state-level coordination. There are different layers of structure that help to define security architecture and democratic control of the armed forces. So it's not because the president is, when you have a president, you already call him a commander-in-chief, he's already a militarized role because he's already a commander. But there are other levels that are mainly and solely civilian that need to be controlled. Our parliament, for instance, when they want to make committee chairs of different forces, yes, I've seen in recent times some civilians heading those committees, but there is the truth about it that they will prefer to appoint someone who is a retired general and a member of the parliament to head those committees. And by the time you do that, you already put another comrade, their comrade in that role. And then even when you have the way they relate with the military institutions as a committee is different from the way they will relate with other institutions that are not military in character. If you just ask, the way the parliament, the National Assembly member will relate with the police or they do with the civil defense is completely different from the way they will relate with the three arms of the military. And that's the structure. So that the civil authority is visioning for the military and shaping that. And that's what we are missing.
Okay, there are many questions that are coming up. I mean, so just to drive this a bit home, it brings us to the issue of accountability and holding our elected officials accountable. I mean, you spoke about that. You alluded to that earlier on when you spoke about, citizens just vote. That's the only time we are agitated. And once the elections are over, what can we do to make sure that our elected officers speak to us, either on a daily basis, we know their views on issues, we hold them accountable, whether you are representing House of Rep, House of Assembly, whether you are president virtually does not speak to Nigerians. I mean, I know that Trump might not be a good example, but the man speaks.
Every
He
day.
doesn't need anybody to speak for him. You are in no doubt of where Trump stands on any issue.
No, every
But
day.
since the only time we hear our own president is, through a formal, and people can't ask him questions, you can't engage with them. How even our governors, the same thing. So what kind of changes can we make? How can we make these people answer us all the time when we need to speak to them?
I think what military rule has done to us is that we have transformed leadership at that level to something like a more monarchical kind of thing. We actually have kings. And in my own context, kings don't talk all the time. And I think Buhari epitomizes that in so many ways. Even when things are happening, disasters occur. Kings don't necessarily go to those places. It's the people who are victims of such disaster that goes to the king. Then the king talks to them and tell them and commiserate with them and tell them what he's doing about it. And I think that's the crisis. We have seen an Obasanjo garrulous engaging and some almost to a level that you wouldn't even like. He's everywhere.
We can't hear you anymore.
That. But I think we can. I think that's a major accountability issues that we need to raise as citizens. And we can't get that done until we create the necessary awareness in our citizens, because there's a perception of who leaders are. And the character of our leaders is also reinforcing that perception. And that the leaders are such revered people. You don't bother them, you don't disturb them. You are supposed to be afraid of them, just like how we related with the military, where we are whipped to get into line and all those things. But when we create the necessary awareness, it's both a long-term and short-term thing. There are things that the government institutions can do in building such awareness, but you can't rely on it because it's not also in the interest of the ruling class for that awareness to be there. So it has to come outside that class. And that is where me and you have very important roles to play. And there are some of you in diaspora, as you are supporting communities, you are supporting family members at home, you are also being able to create platforms for people to have conversations and also learn about how things are done. Even by going home occasionally and telling the story of how where your base is managed can inspire people to actually say we can do things differently in our country. But we really need to invest in that, because even when our leaders say they want to have town hall meetings, they're actually clearly orchestrated elite gathering. They bring politicians and all those things. They determine who speak and who does not speak. And so there is no connections with the people. And you can't run a democracy without such connections with the people. Because the whole idea about we the people is just simply about people shaping directions, people being respected, their sovereignty actually being respected. And that's the direction, because once we get that done, we're able to build necessarily accountability that will help to hold our leaders to account. But we don't have that, then we have a problem. And currently we don't, and we need to invest in that.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before I go to the question platform, you described something almost like a parliamentary system, where you said, because look, running this current presidential system is so expensive. Some have argued that what we probably need in Nigeria today is a parliamentary system. Contest election in your local government or whatever and go to the center. So a president doesn't have to go around the country, to be campaigning, and he will be elected from among his peers. And so you describe almost something equal. Even the House of Rep members, you said they will come from the state assembly, so it's not a separate kind of election. What would you say to people who are agitating that we go back to the parliamentary system?
Yeah, I know people are agitating go back to the parliamentary system, but I tell people again, it wasn't that the parliamentary system we ran in the colonial and the First Republic was perfect. It has a lot of issues and contentions, and we knew how those controversies resulted to some of our most unfortunate crises in the country, the 1966 coup, which eventually snowballed into a terrible civil war. So, and I can tell you, I can count several of the practices of parliamentary system that did not also work for us. But again, if you put them side by side, you may probably see more value in that parliamentary system. That probably what we have needed is to perfect it. And maybe if we had run it for as long as we ran this presidential model, combining Second Republic and this particular republic, we probably would have perfected it. But I come from the school of thought where I don't want to talk about parliamentary, which is typically Westminster British system or presidential, but actually trying to see, is there a middle ground? Is there where we can learn? And there are countries with similar examples of those middle ground structure. India is a very important middle ground structure. South Africa is a very important middle ground system. Even France is also a very important middle ground system around some of those structures. But I think whatever we are putting in place in terms of our structure is that it must suit our context. That we are not America. We don't have the size, we don't have the economy, we don't have the politics. We are not UK. So, but we are Nigerian. We are a very diverse country, over 400 ethnic groups. Then we are trying to even create the necessary social cohesion that we call a nation state. We are a developing society, and therefore whatever we do and how we do it must reflect our context, our today and our future. And so presidential system is not only expensive, it is unaccountable. It's very, very unaccountable. And I think, but whether at state level and at national level. And unfortunately, there's a system we have from the national level up to local government system are all presidential, and they are very expensive. So you go to local government, you have a local government chairman. Then you have elected councillors. Then you have supervisory councillors who are like the ministers or the commissioners at the state level. Then you now have the local government bureaucracy. Crazy. It's expensive. Is irresponsible for the kind of economy that we run. But unfortunately, the system we have today, I don't see the National Assembly delegitimizing itself. I don't see the National Assembly coming to say we have agreed, we want to amend the Constitution to now have a unicameral legislation with the kind of description that I made, because that's where the agency of Nigerian people is really very important, that we have to push the system to a level where it is compelled to make certain changes. And I think that
citizens'
is where
participation. Yeah.
Yes, we have to push the system, that they don't have to always do what they feel like doing. That we have to get the system to do what it doesn't actually like to do, but it is compelled to do it because that is what citizens of the country want to see doing. It wouldn't come at once, but it's a direction that as people, we have to take to get this country on track.
All right, I'll come back to you with question. Boniface Chizia has had his hand up. He wants to be a part of this conversation. Maybe he has a contribution or a question for you. So we allow him to unmute now and chime in on what we are talking, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay,
Dr. Boniface.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Yes, you know, I just want to make a contribution. The state of Nigerian democracy. Let's put it in the foreground. You know, there's a court in Canada that declared APC and PDP as terrorist organizations. and so we are sick. Everybody knows that we don't have politics in Nigeria. We don't have democracy in Nigeria. It's so many funny things happened. The governor of Ebonyi State, councillor didn't attend his daughter's birthday party, and he's denied the payment for 1 month. Now, recently, it's come out to say that the National Assembly, for you to have a bill processed as a member, you have to pay a bribe. Now, just today, this federal government has gone ahead to delete messages in social media. So we don't have a democracy. So I just want to put that on the foreground. Now, the most important point we must take on board here is that What is it's not democracy is not the problem. The system, the procedures, okay, there might be we might have frictions here and there, but the problem is we don't have a selection process. I have said this before on this platform. We must have a selection process that people would go in, and if they've not done well, they will lose the election. We just had the by-elections. No party was exempt. Everybody went and spent money. Now, if you spend money to get to a position, then you know that what people feel about you doesn't matter. So once you get the money, you pay the money, then you have your way. And to that extent, we talk about corruption. Corruption is entrenched. So I see some civil society organizations talking about really trying to have an independent INEC. All these issues we have is because INEC is not independent. We have an INEC that is appointed by the president. Now that's no go. That's not the way to go. So we have to have an INEC that is truly independent. And until all things we say, democracy remains the best form of governance. It's proven. It is. Socialism, they've tried. It's not worked, and so on. It gives incentive, no motivation to work, and so on and so forth. Well, so we have the thing is, first of all, let's have INEC truly independent. Sonny, I'll stop there for now. Maybe.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. It's just a comment.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Dr. Chizia. Dr. Chizia is a regular member on the platform and a very passionate citizen that want to see things work in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
You spoke earlier on, and I will hand over to Jumoke. I'm sure she has some questions, and if there are questions in the chat box. But let me just talk about the education that you spoke about. Education, like we say, is a liberator. Today, we have a generation of Nigerians that probably have never seen anything civil. So people that are 25 years or 30 years and below, they have been born into a Nigeria that's chaotic. All they have seen are the challenges and the problems. So people that were around in the maybe 90s or 80s or 70s can at least say we saw a bit of some of these things.
Yeah.
And Nigeria today is saying we have almost 20 million out-of-school children. Yeah. And nobody is addressing that. When we bring this up at the national level, they say, no, education is a state problem. It's not a national problem. But, how, and we know that education is a foundation for liberating a people.
Yes.
How do we begin to enter the discussion about liberating our people through education?
Thank you. And that's a very important question. And I want to also comment on what the last person said. And I agree with him. I think we started this conversation on that premise that our democracy is flawed. Is quite challenges, and that we use democracy just as a matter of nomenclature, the best way you can describe, but not in terms of its principles, the values, and the systems that is actually expected of it. It's a work in progress. We can continue to push. The INEC, yes, of course, it's not independent. We can do better. In the last 2 weeks, I have been involved in different conversations around INEC on how we can deepen the independence of INEC. Civil society are making different kinds of proposals on what to do, because the tenure of the current leadership of INEC ends at the end of the year, and therefore a new INEC leadership will be the one to conduct the next elections. And therefore Nigerians and as civil society were becoming very concerned about how the INEC leadership is appointed. There are different proposals we are making, not even learning from the Western world, but even learning from our countries like Kenya and South Africa and other places, because sometimes it looks far-fetched when we go that far, but we think that there are basic things that we can do to ensure that we strengthen the independence of the Electoral Commission. But that is not the issue alone. There are a lot of things that undermines our elections, if we just speak about the elections alone. And sometimes it can be very difficult in Nigeria to expect an election that is better than your country. Your election is a reflection of your country. True. And whoever you have there, we always see. So that is what we need to transform. And I agree with you on the education. I think, yes, there's a lot we have to do. And personally, this is an area that worries me as a person. And I've done a lot of education-related programming in Nigeria. But again, because I'm running donor-funded program, it is not simply about nation building and whatever. It's more around getting more children in school, ensuring their retention, and ensuring the quality of teachers, quality of education, and all that. But I think we need to take the conversation on education very seriously. And in Nigeria, we can be very passionate about our education. I'm sorry, about our politics, but you don't find us in spaces where we need to transform systems. So our discussion on health services is very limited. I'm basically, even when we discuss, it's more around commentaries and complaints about how it's not working. The same thing for education. We have a system of education that is removed from the society, and it's important that we get there. We need to overhaul our curriculum. The National Council of Education met recently, and the conversation was simply around whether you want to continue with the 6334 system, or whether you want to reduce or collapse junior secondary school with senior secondary school so that we go back to 6 years of secondary school without break and all those things. But we are not talking about the philosophical, ideological, and system underpinning of our education. We are not visioning in terms of our education. What do we want to achieve with our education? It's not about getting 90% pass rate, 100% pass rate. It's not about that. And I think this is a conversation that we all have to engage to ensure that, because the challenges we're dealing with, the civility and lack of civility that we're struggling with, a lot can be inculcated in school. I was involved in one of the states in northern Nigeria that has been bedeviled by a lot of crises a long time. And I said, look, what you need to do, you may have all your crisis management systems and conflict management design, early warnings and all those things, but you have to go back to school. And you need to teach your children from primary school about some of those issues on conflicts and violent conflicts. And you must also tell them the history and let them grow up to know, because again, part of what is happening, because we are not educating people well in school, they are learning from outside and they are being taught a wrong history. And so we all grew up hating our neighbors and seeing them as our problem. And it becomes just a little trigger and we are ready to carry arms. But if we teach those things in school and we teach them properly, and children are able to ask questions in school and we educate them, when they come out, no one is able to spread those things. Education is very important. And I think it's where we need to focus, one of the places we need to focus our attention. I don't have the exact thing that we need to do in this regard, but if it is mean forming a global formation, a network, a coalition of people who are willing to engage, to have conversation with the Ministry of Education, to engage the Minister of Education, to get people like you and other people who have expertise in this, to even make informed presentations, share memo with those things, and that we should look beyond passing WAEC and beyond how many years you spend in secondary school.
Very,
that we
very
should
good
see.
point. And
Yeah.
I totally align with you because I'm very, very passionate about this education, and it's something that should not just be left to the states. I think the federal government should take an active interest in what is happening to education. At least, so recently they say they are doing a university, what's it called? Student loan. You have not solved the basic level of primary and secondary. Okay, I know when we talk, they will say that belongs to the state, but that's where the bulk of the problem is. Anybody that has done primary and secondary, they will not say he's an illiterate. At least he can basically read and
Actually,
write.
it does not belong to the state. That's a mistake sometimes that they also make. The physical structure of schools, the teachers, and all those things are handled by the state. But the system, the coordination is at the center, because the National Council on Education is the one responsible for defining and visioning for our education. And it's coordinated at the Federal Ministry of Education level. And the structure we operate today are defined by the National Council on Education. So even if you want to make any strategic change in primary schools and secondary schools that are largely controlled by the state government, you still have that. You still need the National Council of State. Secondly, private schools. There are a lot of private schools out there. And you need to know, some of us who have our children in those schools, it's unbelievable. You go to schools where that are actually running parallel curriculums. Parallel curriculums. You have British schools, and basically what they are running is British curriculum. You have American schools, they are running American curriculum, and there is nothing Nigerian about that. And we're not paying attention to this because children going to those schools are very critical to the country, and they're not being properly taught about their country and all those things. So we have left education. The private sector runs basically primary schools. There are more private primary schools than there are public ones these days. There are more private universities
When
than
we
there are
were
public.
growing up, the reverse was totally the case.
We didn't go through private school. We all went through public school from primary all to university and all levels. But that's what you have. I think we haven't been discussing our education enough, and we need to do more.
All right, I would let Jumoke throw in some questions, and if those on the platform have more questions, she will be taking that for us. Thank you very much for your contribution, Hussaini.
Thank you very much, sir. Good evening. We do have a couple of hands. I have a few questions, but I'll wait until the end. Professor Grange and Auntie Yemisi. Auntie Yemisi's hand, she did send a text that she wasn't able to raise her hand. So Auntie, please go ahead with your question. Then we'll take Professor Grange. And then we have a couple of questions in the chat that I will read out to you. So maybe we want to take those two questions. Auntie Yemisi, please go ahead with your question, and then we'll take Professor Grange.
Thank you, Jumoke. Good to see you. Good to see Pastor. A ray of sunshine, we call her, makes our meeting a lot more lively and hopeful. And Dr. Hussain, this is Miss Yemisi Ransom Kuti.
I didn't know you are. Good to see you. Good to hear your voice.
Good to see you. I say aluta continua. We have to keep on with the struggle. Yes, I have a few questions for you.
Okay. Yes.
First of all, let me clarify something that Mr. Bonnie Chizia said about PDP and APC being classified as a terrorist organization. That was not the case. If you read the whole judgment, it certainly wasn't that. So I just wanted to make sure that is cleared so that our listeners don't, propagate the statements that had gone viral that political party, although they behave a little bit like, but that particular court judgment did not classify them as terrorists.
You should have called them bandits.
Something else, but not terrorists. Anyway, so my questions are around the education problem. I think a lot more attention should be paid to the girl child.
Yeah.
And, that will address, the results that come out with, early marriage and, giving birth to children that become terrorists and all that. A lot of issues I think will address if we prioritize the education of the girl child. Then the other point I want to make is that you talked a lot about the local government. And that is actually the foundation, I think, of all our problems. And if we don't sort it out, we will continue to have multiple challenges that we have. We are in Lagos have tried to set up a network at the local government level. We call it Lagos Island Connect because we're dealing with the Lagos Island local government. And I think that is what we as civil society, we formed national networks, we formed a lot of state networks, but we don't have that sort of structure at the local government where CSOs are engaging with the government, they're engaging with development partners, engaging with the private sector, and this is what we have done. So I just wanted for you to have some thoughts about whether you agree with that. I will send you some of the information we have so that maybe we can progress the conversation further. But I want us to really understand that the people at the local government that we really need to engage with are the councillors, because they are the really bottom of the political pyramid. And they are the ones we can engage, surround, educate, build capacity, and then make sure that the challenges are taken up the chain. So now that some of them have just been elected, I'm encouraging everybody to set up their local government network so that together, because isolated voices don't do anything. Screaming at Tinubu and Sanwo-Olu may not help us very much. But organizing at that local, in your own local government, so that you are able to engage effectively as a group with the system is going to make a lot of difference. And the council managers in the local government are really the power blocks. They are the palm secs of the local government. And I don't think we pay enough attention to what they are doing and how they're doing their work. So with what we're doing in LIC, I will engage with you later, but I really want your thoughts about what kind of structures we could develop at that local government level so that we build the foundation for the democracy we want. Once again, lovely to see you,
Thank
and
you.
we continue to admire the work you're doing with Yaga Africa and all of that. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank
All
you.
right then.
Thank you. We are going to have Professor Grange, if you can take those two, and then we have a couple of comments, and then we can close with my own questions. Please go ahead, Professor Grange.
Yes, thank you very much, Jumoke. And thank you, Dr. Hussain.
Thank you, sir.
Comprehensive manner. Your analysis is on the spot. Let me just make comments on two areas. The area of education. Education starts from the home. Unfortunately for us, a big problem with we would like women to be free to carry on with their own career, profession, etc. And at the same time, be able to support the family, to look after the children in the family. So you have the double burden on women. And I believe that a good system should take that into consideration and try and see how the women, the mothers can be supported to stay at home, maybe in the first 2 years of their delivery and all that, but supported. They cannot just stay at home and not be able to a living. So that be done. It used to be like that in the developed countries. I think it's still like that in UK. I know that when I had my first baby and I took her to UK, I could not be able to take her to any creche, so I had to stay at home and look after her. And, there are positive advantages in children being able to be with their parents, their mothers, in the first 2-3 years of life, even a little bit longer. If you want to educate children for sustainable, to imbibe values in a sustainable way, it has to be done before the age of 7. After 7, you can forget it. They will be picking other values elsewhere, and particularly online. So we have to really think very seriously about the kind of families or how we can get our families to help our children. Secondly, elections. I've just discovered, I was told, I mean, I was flabbergasted when I was told this, that there are women who are told, who have been organized to make sure women vote, you know. Let's face it, they are paid. They are paid in advance. And when they are paid, they don't use the money fully. They take half of it. And the other people, you know, also take over and take another half. So what is happening is that people have now normalized corruption during elections. And, you know, it's sort of like they're not ashamed to say that they have not given the right amount of money to these people. So we have to look at the moral aspect of society, the morality, which you have also said. But let's look at different points, different areas. So thank you very much. Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Ma. Yes. Can you take those
Mhm.
two before I read some questions from the chat, or actually a comment, but that is shaped into a question? So if you can address those two, and then
Okay.
we'll take, yes, go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for the two comments, and very appreciated. Yes, I agree. Girls' education is very important, particularly in northern Nigeria, where we are dealing with dual problems of one, low level of education enrollment and completion, not just for girls, but worse for girls. And then where we are also dealing with a huge crisis of maternal mortality. And that too, and studies have actually shown that in context where girls receive education up to secondary school, you are actually able to cut down the level of maternal mortality, and hugely. And then again, studies have also shown clearly that where you are also able to ensure girls' education up to secondary school level, you are also able to significantly drop early and forced child marriages. So and these are, so meaning that education can solve a lot of things if we invest in it. And that's the conversation, even at the national level, even at the level of the Ministry of Education, that have been fully accepted. The Ministry of Women Affairs is very clear about some of those things. And there have been massive investment over the years to support girl child enrollment and completion from different development partners, including agencies like ours, World Bank. The World Bank runs a very significant project around that at the moment. FCDO, formerly DFID, USA. There have been massive investment to support that. And I think it's an area that we also need to pay a very significant attention to, because once a girl is educated, even the child is also brought up differently. And then the choices the girl also made, even for marriages and all those things, are also very different. So I think education is really, really fundamental if we actually want to transform our society. So I agree. On the local government, I actually think, yes, that's true. That's the government. Ordinarily, that's the government that's supposed to be closer to us. It's the closest government to us. But you know, not in terms of location. Lagos is actually an island. Things are not perfect in Lagos, but in the context of Nigeria, Lagos is an island of performance. Yes, people can bring you different reasons. The economy of Lagos is much bigger. There is more resources available to them. It's more industrialized, and therefore it has a relatively good middle class who we actually ask questions, which I think they don't ask much. People are paying tax in Lagos, and therefore they will always raise questions around what is being done with their resources. So there's something more different about Lagos relative to other states in the country, including the performance of the state government. It may not be doing fantastic relative to what is available to it, but when you compare it to other states, you see a very clear difference. So I think having a small committee to engage the local government system is very important. And I think that's the kind of participation that we are talking about, that we're able to engage the councillors, because every ward has a councillor representing it. And I think is the minimum number of councillors, if I'm not mistaken, is 10, and the maximum is 12. So meaning that in every local government, you have up to about 10 local government councillors. And so knowing your councillor and people organizing around that, and then you also have through the councillor, different supervisory councillors who are like the commissioners or ministers at the local government level. So you know whom to interface with, and engaging them helps a lot. And I think if every one of us can do that within our local government, I think we can begin to hold the local governments to account. So I will encourage that. And there are basic things that people do. You can have your own engagement framework. You can actually have your community demands and what you want the local government to do for you, and then you engage them on that basis. Yes, and Prof, your comments are also is also on education, and I agree. Basically, now what we call it unpaid care work, the unpaid care work that women do, because it's not paid for, family responsibility, because of the nature of our society, can also undermine, in quote, their productivity and all that. And it's important to have mechanism that supports that. Maternity leave, I think Nigeria has enhanced it in recent time, but not in many states across at the national level. I think it's about 4 months now, if I'm not mistaken. They've increased it, but state governments are still very, very poor in terms of provisions on maternity leave for working class women. And I think these are things that we also need to engage in terms of responsibility that women take. I agree that education starts from home, and that's why we always say there's a primary level of socialization. But whatever we do at home, again, is still very, very, very interconnected with what happens in school, because the school one is very long term. And you will agree with me, if you have a child who is in school, at a point, the children tend to even believe what their teacher says than they believe what their parents say. And so the influence of teachers and school is quite unbelievable, is huge. And that is why we can't substitute this. I think they are complementary, they work together, and any family that pays attention to his child's education ends up having the child come up better. We can't just surrender children's upbringing to teachers. We have a responsibility to do that, to bring up our children. And many times this is what we see, particularly for the working families, and we don't have time, and teachers end up doing some of those things. And I think it's not a good thing. It's important for us to note that. Then women being paid, vote buying is a reality in our country. And it has to do, one, with poverty, and two, with the level of corruption in the country. Corruption is so endemic, and our tolerance level for it is very, very high. And it's almost like people go out there to steal on your behalf. If it's your friend, or if it's your family member, or if your classmate, and all those things. So our tolerance level is so high for corruption, and therefore this is also what is perpetrating vote buying. Sometimes people take this money because they just feel, oh God, these people, they are very useless people. After voting now, you will not see them again. Just collect whatever you can collect now, and it's fine. And I have a politician friend, just to tell this, who told me that one thing you don't do in politics is that you don't give money to a politician to go and give to people. That because when you give to the politician to go and give to people, if you are lucky, he gives, but he will massively cut out of it. And that's probably what is happening here. So when you have women's group who have been asked to mobilize more women to vote, and then the politician gave the money to the woman's leader, and then she takes the money, and then she's going to mobilize them to vote, and then she takes her own court and give to these ones, and then you go. It's a client, is what political scientists like called clientelism. It's a clientele system that is very structured. In the contemporary cycle, you have different layer of hierarchy of people. The top one take it, give it to the down, and it goes on and on like that. I think vote buying, we can checkmate vote buying only when we are able to significantly deal with the challenges of corruption, because it's corruption that you use to sustain yourself in power. And the best you can do, vote buying, give money to voters to vote for you, influence the Electoral Commission with money, and influence the court with money, fortunately. Over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for those responses. There are a few questions in the chat that I want to follow up with. One asked, how do we create a local government network if there's a blueprint to share for creating a local government network? And my follow-up question, so one of the questions I was going to ask was, how do we reach the grassroots level to build critical mass on this education? Because again, it's the elites that are talking, but what is the percentage of these elites compared to those that really are the grassroots level that politicians are able to manipulate? Then the second question is, how is ActionAid educating citizens to understand their roles and responsibility in democracy?
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to take the last one, or do you want me to take
you can take the last one.
Okay, let me take the last one. I'll read it from here. It says, it's a comment that is also a question. We can make every conversation end with a call to action, even if it's something as simple as knowing who our local House of Representatives and senators are. Who is our local government chairman? Access to them and understanding of what their obligations are. If we take a poll right now, how many would have this information? Once we know, we act positively towards enabling responsible action for our community. So that question is, how do we get people to understand, which kind of follows up the two questions that are here.
Yeah, I think so. They are almost the same. Yes. Thank you for those questions. I will start with the ActionAid one. I'm not longer the country director of ActionAid. I left ActionAid way back in 2015. And after that, I was country director in Plan and then at Care International. And then some months back, I took a role in Addis Ababa as the representative in the African Union. But I've been back and I'm leading the Social Development Action Trust, which is a Pan-African development and humanitarian organization in Nigeria. And it was in that context that I was found, because we did a study, we did something that was supported by Ford Foundation on democracy in Nigeria, where we did an extensive analysis of stakeholders' demands around sustainable development. And that was the report that was shared with you earlier. So this is where I am at the moment. But yes, I have because I've been spent close to 7 years as country director in ActionAid, and we have strong link, and the leadership, I still have good friends there, and they do a lot of beautiful community level work, working closely with local community and dealing with issues that bother some on poverty. And there are leading agencies around that in terms of community level engagement and mobilizing community actions to deal with the challenges of poverty, bordering on health, bordering on education, and other major social development concerns. How do we build a local government network? I think one is, it's important to have a group of like minds. This is how it always starts. It never starts big. To build a kind of network, you need 1 or 2 people who are very interested in it. And then from that 1 or 2 people, you begin to expand. And they can decide to formalize it, having a structure, defining a leadership, and designing what you want to do. And then you can bring out your community issues, what you actually expect from the local government, and how you want to engage the local government. You define the regularity of your engagement. Where resources are required, you look at where you're going to draw or derive the resources from. It's not different from forming any community action group. I think it's always about the people. And you need to be very clear. Sometimes we can have some of those things and we become adversarial. And then when we look at, we lose the goodwill. And then your way you cannot get them to change is for you to be able to mobilize people to protest against them. But when you are not less adversarial and you're more strategic about it, you are able to have the local government chairman, you're able to make this. And you know, advocacy, I always tell people that it's a spectrum. It starts from point of cooperation to confrontation. And within that spectrum, there is a lot of actions that you can take that can actually give you result. I don't have any particular material, but I know there's a lot of materials online in terms of community action building, building your own networks and all that you can leverage on. But I think that what is important for you is to recognize what you want to do. Start small, and then gradually you grow around that. The bigger, sometimes the better, because you can attract respect on that. Because again, they are politicians. They are worried when your platform is big because it's a voters base. If you decide not to vote for them, it may mean something. And when they have you on their side, then it means you will vote for them. So I think that kind of structure will help. But it starts with a few like minds who begin to put that together, who bring people to join. There are other networks that also do. There's a network approach to it, which means that at the local government level, there are different platforms of people who are already organized. And then you walk around those people and you draw them to join this network that you are instituting. So you take, for instance, road transport workers associations, association of tailors, association of vulcanizers in your community, the women farmers. There are different kinds of associations that already exist within those local governments. And then you can draw them, you bring the associations together to that platform, and then you have a representation. And that you use. So therefore, the interest of this association can be advanced through the advocacy effort that you are making. And I think I found those kind of processes also very, very efficient. Even when you have your own local government engagement platform, occasionally drawing on these existing unions and associations and platform for certain action can be very effective. So I think these are things you may need to look at. So how do you reach the grassroots? And I think these are also the mechanisms that we talked about. Anywhere and everywhere, the grassroots actually have to be galvanized. It has to be led because it is the grassroots. It is poor. It can be very disempowered and all those things. But somebody have to lead them. Somebody have to drive them. And then when they galvanize and their interest is developed, and that's when their issues begin to drive the system. Otherwise, the grassroots is more about life and livelihood. They just want to survive, and they have no interest in what distracts them from that quest for survival. And so when you engage them, when you don't engage them, they live their life normal until someone provokes them. And then when they are provoked, that's when you feel their anger. But otherwise, they'll live their life. But what we do is for us to take that and engage them and mobilize their interests. And the best way to mobilize their interests is to also to provide a connection between what you intend to do and their lives and livelihood. There must be a connection. When there is no connection, you don't get the interest. It's a natural way we relate as human beings. We must get connected to something. So if you are able to connect your action to their material condition and how such action can improve their material condition or the condition of their children or their family or their community, you are able to connect that. Then you are also able to build that kind of grassroots movement that can support it. And I think that's what we need to do for everything that we do, whether we are doing voter education, whether we are doing advocacy on education or health services or engaging local government. We need to work to build a critical mass that can actually help that can be the major echo that can continue to push, that will also allow us, like Yemisi mentioned earlier, that you don't do it alone. If you have the mass, it's easier for you to be respected than when you are doing it alone.
Thank you very much. And these are my last two questions. You know, there's a lot of talk about the influence of international organizations in wanting to destabilize Nigeria's democracy because it's in their best interest for Nigeria to remain weakened. And you have some, I mean, you've had some relationship. You talked about the Ford Foundation and some of the other international communities that you're working with. Should we really be very concerned about the influence, and how do we as Nigerians navigate that? Because they are entrenched in the system. There's a lot of funding that comes from the international community under the guise of trying to help Nigeria. Does it help, or does it further destabilize us? That is one question. And then the second question that I have is, you know, we talk about network and coalition, and how do we really get the Nigerian elite to bind together and put their, and I'm not saying put the mission or the vision of the organization aside, but how do we come to that common center of really wrestling for the soul of Nigeria? And I look at the politicians, and they're building coalition for one simple goal, because they want Nigeria. And we as community organizations, citizens, we have a hard time building that coalition for this interest, for this common interest. So, you know, if you can respond to those two questions as part of your closing remark, and we'll begin to close.
Thank you. These are very important questions you ask, and international organizations and agencies. And I've had those narratives in a recent time. Yes, of course, conflict of interest. I'm involved. I'm in that space. And naturally, people expect that you wouldn't say anything against it. But the truth about it, should we be worried? Yes, we should be worried. We should be worried when resources are coming, and therefore, and the resources are coming to help people and all that, and support people's interventions. We should be worried because there are resources involved, and therefore we should know what people are doing with those resources, and that's the first area of worry. But you need to be honest with you, the kind of resources we have for international development partners, it's just peanuts. It's not compared to what we have as a country. The entire development assistance that comes to Nigeria is less than 2% of Nigerian gross national income. Less than 2%. I'm the one telling you this. Nigeria is not a donor destination. There are no many donors out there in Nigeria. Yes, some of them who are in Nigeria can be significant in terms of their size, and what they are doing can also be very significant. So USAID, before Trump, or FCDO, that's defeat the British one. Canadian have grown significantly in the last few years, but European Union has also been big around that. But beyond that, nothing. It's not a typical donor destination. I think in the last 10, 15 years, where the number increased was the escalation in violence in the Northeast, where you have a lot of humanitarian organizations and agencies that want to support the humanitarian and provide humanitarian assistance in those locations upcoming. But the truth about it, is it working for those of them who are here, who are supporting with this less than 2% that I'm talking about? It does work. And also, I'll tell you, look at the point in this country, over 82% of HIV/AIDS intervention resources are coming from donors. Government abandoned it to donors. Government practically abandoned it. The response to maternal health crisis, government abandoned it. And donors were the one taking care of dealing with that. The whole conversation we've been having now, everyone has spoken about, we've all spoken about education. Some of the biggest investment on education actually coming from donors. major interventions, whether it's girl child education or whether you are talking about teachers training, or whether you are talking about enrollment, the work that UNICEF is doing on girl child education, which you call the GAP, and has been running for over 10 years of interventions around those areas. You wouldn't know how much this is working until probably you imagine where we would have been without them. The crisis in the Northeast, without the humanitarian organizations that are present, we have our own limitations and challenges, and sometimes even some of us insiders will make some criticism about how this is. I personally think that sometimes the way we work, the kind of services that we are providing is actually making government irresponsible. I actually think that we're spending our money organizing people and getting them to hold their leaders and government to account to provide those services than we directly going to provide the services. And because the more we provide those services, the more we excuse the government. And the more probably sometimes the money they will have used for those services, they are pocketing it. And so I think that our intervention should probably be more about maybe organizing people and having, advancing their rights and getting them to make the right demand so that the government will provide it. But again, people are exhausted. People are pain. Sometimes their situation is an emergency. So it cannot wait until you organize them for them to actually be able to get them. Sometimes the system can be also very disempowering. We just talk about local government. They don't have anything because state government have cornered it until now that some of them are waking up to those realities. They've cornered them. Corruption is not allowing services to be provided. And so if you can provide, why don't you do? And so what other organizations are doing, like ActionAid will say, we model. Instead of actually going there and building school, we can build schools, but we use the school that we build, the model and how we do it and the cost we use to build it, we use that to organize people to make demands on government to provide it. So if you can build classroom with 5 million and government is telling you that a two classroom will only be built with 25 million, people are able to say, no, but this organization had this beautiful classroom with 5 million naira. So why are you saying 25 million? And you have that. We have had instances where you do that and then you put it sometimes to shame. You say, you put a signboard on the school and say this school was built by a social community with support from ActionAid or from CARE or from Plan at the cost of this. And I tell you, there are instances where you wake up in the morning and someone has put paint and they've covered it or they have removed your billboard because they don't want you to state how much it cost you to build such a beautiful, because at the end of the day, the one you built is better than the one the local government probably is building. So that's it. So I think there are a lot out there. It's a conversation, it's a debate, but I knew that, yes, we should be worried about it because the resources are involved and therefore we need to hold people who are managing it accountable. But I knew that there are insignificant impact being made around that. Then there is how do we get Nigerian elite to bind together? Unfortunately, that's a very important question. This is the only country we have, and we have to work together to get this country on track. But again, our identity politics has become a tool. It's an instrument that people use to galvanize their politics, to get into position to do some of those things. But they also have to understand that they can be in those positions only when there is Nigeria. When there is no Nigeria, they are not there. And if they want to know, I always use Sudan as an example because Sudan was almost like Nigeria. It was a very thriving country. But look at where Sudan has found itself today. I've been in meetings and conversations in platforms with Sudanese elite in Addis Ababa, in different locations where they are lamenting about their situation, recognizing that there are things they should have done or they ought to have done that would have contained it, that wouldn't have made the situation could get to the level that it is today. But they failed as elite. And today they don't have a country. And I think that this is what our leaders need to understand, that we need this country more than the country needs us. And therefore, working together, binding together, visioning for this country, collectively, despite our differences, is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what I want us to end this session with a call to action. What will be that call to action? I have mine. that we as a group sitting here today will say we spent some time with Dr. Hussain, and this is my call to action that I'm going to follow up on. You talked about lessons learned, and there's always historical lessons learned is for the next group. Talked about Sudan. If you could add those into your call to action for us to take away from here, that this is what we as Nigerian citizens should start to do.
Yeah, I think my call to action is to say that as Nigerians, we have a country, and we recognize that this is a country of tremendous prospect that has been abused. And we have found ourselves today on our knees, and that everywhere we all have a responsibility to work to raise this country. The country and its leadership might have disappointed us in different ways, but this is the only country that we have. And getting it better is our collective responsibility. And this call is that we don't wait for the government to do it. Because within the government, there are people who are benefiting from the chaos and the disorder that the country is going through. They are beneficiaries of it. So it is not in their interest for things to get better. And that is why we have to work despite these people and organize ourselves, work across different ethnicity, religions, and regional formation to advance the cause of this country. Because if we don't do, we will ultimately regret our actions. Like the example I was giving about Sudan. Things starts like this. And that it is at this moment that we need to correct those things before they get to an escalating point that probably we may not be able to contain. We call on the government to be more serious on these issues and work to see how we can better sustain our democracy. That our electoral commission must become independent so that citizens can begin to trust it again, and then it can be able to run a fair and credible elections. The elections or democracy itself as a system is meaningless, just like any other system, unless it is able to literally put food on the table for the people. And I'm saying literally here, that it must be empowering. It must be able to respond to the social economic challenges of the people. Otherwise, and that is what we need to understand. That being in a region where we are experiencing massive democracy backsliding, we have a responsibility to guard what we currently have. And that will require fundamental changes, reforms, and we call on the government and the citizens of this country to work really, really hard, mobilize across different spaces to ensure that we make the right push to get this country on track. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very powerful words. And if I may just add my own call to action, for each of us to be the leader we wish to see, a leader that truly represents the interest of the people, that serve the people, leaders that respect the rule of law, leaders that love the nation and love the people, that serve in the interest of the people. And so our call to action from Africa Leadership Group is we're inviting everyone. And sir, I'm going to follow up with you again after this, behind the scenes. So we developed what we're calling the Youth Leadership and Governance Development Program. And the purpose of this is to build a pipeline of ethical, capable youth leaders ready for roles in governance, administration, and policy making. People can only give what they have. We need to equip our youths with this skill sets, with the tools that they need, and for them to start taking their rightful place in leadership. So that objective is in-depth training in leadership, governance, and ethics, facilitate mentorship, community projects, and internship, promote youth engagement in public service, support long-term capacity building, and policy advocate. And we believe the impact we would, at least our aim is to develop at least at least 774 youths that will represent each of the local governments, increase youth participation in local governance structure, build a growing alumni network of ethical change agents who deliver impactful community development project. So that's our call to action. And we're inviting you, sir, especially with your experience, to join us. We don't all this training we do for free. We don't charge, because again, we're trying to get away from monetizing leadership. We're trying to also impress upon the youths that they have a service, they have a responsibility to serve this nation. So we are calling on everyone who has an interest in this to please come on board. We want to start this program in November of this year, by God's grace. So, and this is something I always say, that Nigeria hasn't been good to the youth, especially for those of us that grew up in the 50s and 60s. We enjoyed we enjoyed Nigeria to a certain extent. These kids, I shouldn't call them kids, these youth have been traumatized. Things have not worked for them. They don't, a lot of them don't even know what street lights are, or, you know, the benefit of being in a developing society. So this is a call to action. We need to mobilize ourselves to begin to help the youth. Otherwise, all these old men running for office over and over again, there's no reason why a lot of these people should still be in politics. They've gone past their
prime.
I don't want to use the word, but this is, if we are able to breed responsible, ethical youth. Look at what is happening around the world, where youths are really taking their position in governance. So that's our call to action. I've put a link. Again, I'm going to share the link again for you to fill that form, and we'll get in touch with you. If this is something that you are interested in, I will put my phone number in the chat room. Please reach out to us. And for other like-minded organizations, we're working with Auntie Yemisi's group and some other groups on building a coalition for participatory governance, where we want to start building this templates for accountability, having town hall meetings, not virtual town hall meetings, but physical town hall meetings at the local government, inviting this the chairperson of that local government to come and speak about their project, but again, in partnership with the community. What areas do you need help with? Is it in capacity building? ALG now, for example, can teach about legal process, project management. How do we come in to partner with you for you to develop, for you to deliver on your promises and to build your community? So these are some of the things that we are doing, and we are really inviting organizations to join us on this. This is our call to action to you, and also to you, sir. We have a school of leadership that we definitely want to tap you to come teach for us and get as many people from across the 6 geopolitical zone. We need to start uniting around these common goals, right? It's not the Northeast is doing its own, the Southwest is doing their own, South. We are so fragmented, but we come together as Nigeria for that common purpose of building a strong nation. So I've preached today. I've preached on the gospel of good Nigeria, but thank you so very much. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and for that brilliant presentation. I'll be sharing Faye, can you project the cover of the report that we got that brought us to this point? As soon as I saw that, I reached out to Comrade Mekudi. I said, we got to have this gentleman. Thank you. We got to have the professor on NLS. Yeah. And so thank you for making time. There's a lot of information there, and we are hoping that we can work with you and other like-minded organizations, not tomorrow, right now, because 2027 is around the corner. I don't know that we have the time to really sit back and wait for 2027 to happen. I don't know if we can survive it. So the call to action is now, not tomorrow. Wow. So we need to really put our hands to the plow and work to dig ourselves out of this situation. I'm not using any negative words for us to continue to push ahead. So thank you. Pastor Sonny, I don't know if you have anything else to add or we should close.
No,
Again.
I think you can close, really.
Okay.
I really just thank you very much for your presentation. I can see he's a bit tired. 2 hours is a stretch. Thank you for staying the course. God
Indeed.
bless you.
Thank you. And many
All right.
thanks from our president too. He had to leave for another meeting. He actually had to step out of a meeting to get this program started. So he sends his apologies and also his appreciation, and definitely will be following up with you to see how we can work with you. So thank you everyone for joining us again this evening. Always time well spent, and this was a very, very insightful conversation. Please share with your network. We have it on YouTube. I'll be sharing that for those that missed today's session. And we meet here every week, every Thursday at 5 p.m. The conversation needs to continue, because as we talk, we learn, and then we build those networks, we build those relationships that we need to really move this country forward. So we are grateful that you are part of this journey with us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, Thursday, same time, same Zoom link, just a different topic. And I believe we have the flyer for next week. We have Prophet Issa. Faye, do you have that flyer that you can project? We have the flyer for next week. I think it's Prophet Issa Buba that is going to be joining us next week. So please don't wait for the flyer. Just click on this link, save it on your calendar, and then we'll see you same time next week. Have a good evening, everyone. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Again, thank you so very much, sir, for such insightful conversation. I think I'm going to listen to it again because there were so many.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you. I am going to unmute you. Thank you. And have a good evening. So you're all unmuted now.